Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. I'm an analytical hypnotherapist and a psychological astrologer, and I am joined today by Louise Hamlin, who's written a very exciting book called WhatsApps from Heaven. Louise, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on your show, Anna. I'm delighted to be here.
When I saw the title of your book, I knew I wanted to read it and I knew I wanted to have you on. Normally, I look through and see what the book is about and to get a feel for it before I decide whether or not to invite somebody on. Your title said it, and I thought, right, that's it.
I mean, perhaps I ought to explain to your listeners that WhatsApp is an app that is used all the time in the UK. And basically, it's an app that allows you to text and create groups and text to the group and send photographs. I don't think WhatsApp is quite so usual in the US.
Well, it's a very useful tool. And the key here is that it has been part of healing your grief over the loss of your beloved husband. So I think maybe, first of all, tell us a little bit about that part of your experience, and then we can start talking about what your experience has been since his passing.
Sure. Well, I was very, very happily married to my husband, and I loved him very deeply, and he loved me. It was a second marriage for both of us. We only got married in 2010, and we couldn't believe our luck, really, in having found each other. He was a very vigorous, apparently healthy man, and then suddenly he started to have a few symptoms, went to the doctor, was told that he had stage 4 bile duct cancer, and within 3 months he was dead. And this was an enormous shock for both of us. We talked about dying and death before he did die. He said he didn't really think there would be an afterlife, but he wasn't shutting the door on it, and I felt the same. He said, well, really, death is nothing to fear, because either it's nothing, or if there is an afterlife, then I think I've led a good enough life. And I thought, yeah, that's absolutely right. But he died, and I was absolutely overwhelmed with grief. And then slowly signs started to come, which amazed me, because I hadn't really believed in an afterlife. Now I do.
Yes. Reading your book, I think the thing I found particularly sad is that when you approached members of the Church of England, out of 3 members of the clergy, only 1 actually believed in an afterlife. I found that to be so sad, not at all surprising, but so sad, because it seems that in our society, we have lost this link to a wisdom that was there once before. And we've got somewhat lost. So part of the reason why I found your book so exciting was because I felt that I was with you on this journey of discovering this link. And the joy I felt for you and feel for you is tremendous. So I am so deeply moved by the fact that you've actually written about it.
Well, thank you. And yes, I was really taken aback and surprised when the first two members of the clergy that I approached and said, do you believe in an afterlife? Because I was desperate to believe that there was one. I couldn't bear to think that Patrick, my husband, just no longer existed, full stop. But the first two were just so wishy-washy about it. And I did find that surprising because, it is a basic tenet of Christianity. But there we go. The third clergyman whom I approached was lovely. And he said, yes, of course, I believe in an afterlife 100%. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing the job I'm doing. And that was cheering. But I guess that what I found eventually after talking to lots and lots of people was that I seemed to be having these signs and was really amazed and staggered by them. And other people were getting signs too from their loved ones, but nobody was talking about it. And people said, oh, well, I haven't told anybody because I didn't want to be thought crazy. And I thought, this is a nonsense. If lots of us are getting signs, but there's this conspiracy of silence about it.
Yes, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? What you were wanting was for somebody to tell you what you felt in your heart was real. So the question you were asking of the clergy was, I want to believe this because I feel it in my heart. Please reaffirm that for me. And two of them didn't do that. And then you started to get signs and you still didn't dare believe because it's the thing you most wanted to have in the whole wide world was a sign that Patrick was there. But what if it was just your imagination? What if it wasn't real? And that's why they just kept coming.
Oh, Anna Isabel, you explain that beautifully and very, very accurately. And what I should perhaps say to the listeners is, I used to be a lawyer. I was a land lawyer. So I had been brought up to be pretty black and white. And I had, I suppose, quite a conventional approach to what was real and what wasn't. And of course, what started to happen was completely beyond the expectations of a serious lawyer, quite beyond.
It challenges, when these things begin to happen, is they challenge our view of reality, because we think that reality is everything that we can touch and see and explain. But actually, that's what we've been trained to believe. In our hearts, many of us feel that there's more to it than that, because there's these odd things that happen, which are coincidences. But on the other hand, what are the odds, we say? So there's all these things that happen and that are nudges to understanding that there's more to life than meets the eye. And so there you were, trained to be very left-brained in your approach to life, having very right brain experiences.
Yes. And it took me a long time to finally realize that, yes, Patrick was sending me signs. And, poor old Patrick, luckily he was an alpha male and a very determined man, because he worked really hard trying to get through to me and trying to say to me, darling, I'm alive in spirit and I love you. And to start with, I explained everything away, or I just couldn't totally believe it. I was a hard nut to crack. I really was. But bless him, he kept on trying.
So share with us some of the signs that you got.
Well, to start with, our friends began to get signs, and I didn't. And looking back on it now, I think that's because I was just so overwhelmed with grief that, I wouldn't have noticed the sign if it had been in front of me and I tripped over it. So within 5 days of his passing, for example, a friend asked Patrick for a sign, and she asked for a flame. And she said, Patrick, I'd like to see a flame today so that I know you're okay, but not in a fireplace and not a candle. So she thought that was sort of a challenging request, but possible. And she slightly forgot about it and went about her day. And then in the evening, she went to draw her curtains and saw from her sitting room window a tall, thin flame in the next door's garden. She ran and got her camera and took a photograph of it, and then the flame subsided. And she sent me the photograph, and she said, Louise, I don't know whether I should tell you this or not, but this is what's happened. And look, here's the photo. And I don't believe in coincidences. I think this is a sign from Patrick, saying he's okay. But of course, I did believe in coincidences. Don't know that I do now, but I certainly did believe in coincidences then. And in fact, this same friend, who is quite psychic, she was driving home from Patrick's funeral, and she thought that she would ask him if he could arrange to play I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick on the radio, because she had the radio on as she was driving. And she asked for that because it was a song that she likes, but she'd never actually heard broadcast in the UK. She got home and hadn't heard it on the radio, but then the next morning she went to the railway station to collect her parents who were coming to visit. And as she stood on the platform waiting for them, guess what they played over the tannoy?
That is such an extraordinary thing, because this is a song that I certainly haven't heard played anywhere for a very long time. And it's not even the radio. She's at a railway station and it's over the tannoy. I can't remember when I last heard music on the tannoy of a railway station.
I know. And I mean, to be frank, I'd never heard of the song. So yeah. And another friend saw feathers. She said she was thinking of Patrick, and suddenly 2 big fat white feathers floated down in front of her, and the sky was clear and blue and she couldn't see where they'd come from. Another friend said that all the lights had turned on in her bedroom when nobody was there, and again she'd been thinking of Patrick and she was sure it was Patrick. So it went on, and all these friends were telling me, and I was thinking, yeah. So eventually I decided to have a go. I did it quite soon after he died, and when all this was happening, decide I would ask for a feather, and nothing materialized, though a friend then WhatsApped me a little later and said, oh, a feather's just floated down in front of me. So who knows? I asked to see a feather on a train because I was about to get a couple of trains the next day. And anyway, the next day I got on a train and it was quite crowded, but there were a couple of empty seats at the far end of the carriage. So I rushed there and sat down and felt very relieved that I got a seat. And then I glanced at the seat next to me, and guess what? There was just a little feather. And they were foam-filled seats, there was no reason at all for there to be a feather there. But if you're determined that something's going to be a coincidence, you can think, yeah, it's a coincidence. And because I was so desperate to know that Patrick still survived in spirit, I was reluctant to start recognizing signs as signs, because I thought that it would be wishful thinking rather than reality.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Is the fear that what appears to be hopeful might not be real.
Yes.
And the devastating feeling that would come if it wasn't real. If somebody said to you, well, it's not real, it's here's the explanation. The feather is there because somebody was wearing a down jacket.
Yes.
But then the answer is yes, but why did it fall there, and why did you in that moment come and sit there? There's still that question to be answered, because what I understand is that, yes, let's imagine somebody was sitting there with a down jacket and a little feather came off the jacket. It's been orchestrated for that to happen. They have been the means by which it got there, or it blew in through the window. There's been a means by which it got there. And how did you manage in such a crowded train to find 2 seats?
Yes.
Just where there was that feather. So it doesn't matter how that feather got there. The fact of the matter is it was there, and you somehow managed to be the one who went and sat right there at that moment. And that's the bit that's important.
I think you're absolutely right. And now, looking back on it, I have absolutely no doubt at all that it was a sign, and a very exact sign. I asked to see a feather on a train, and what did I see? A feather on a train. But at the time, I still wasn't sure. And it was really the WhatsApps that eventually convinced me. That, and also some of the things that mediums said, because I also went to see mediums at this time. And, it's a classic case of cognitive dissonance, insofar as I sort of didn't believe in an afterlife, but on the other hand, I sort of did. And I went to mediums just in case. And some of the mediums I saw, because I think I saw about 5 of them in total, said things which were extraordinary. And I was sort of quite blown away by the things that they said.
Yeah.
I should say here that the first medium I saw didn't blow me away at all. In fact, she didn't seem to say anything that connected with Patrick. And she ended up being a bit sort of ratty with me, because I kept on saying, well, no. And I'm very pleased I didn't leave it at that. Instead, I went off and saw a second medium who is brilliant. And I guess that my message here is, if you see a medium and you don't feel that she or he has made contact, try a different medium.
Absolutely, because it's not an exact science, mediumship, and you connect. You may have the right connection, you may have the wrong connection. It could be that you're not feeling on top form that day and you're a bit hazy. It's not an exact science. And sometimes the person who is sitting in front of you may also not be completely tuned in, because they're expecting something very specific, and it might take a little while to warm up. And unless they're getting that specific, then it makes it difficult to get that warming up and strengthening of the link. So it's not an exact science. So we always have to, you're absolutely right. If you're looking for a medium and the first one doesn't work out, keep searching, because that's the thing. Sometimes people go away and they think, how could I have missed that? She mentioned this. And it's, yeah, it's about my childhood, and I couldn't see the link. And yes, there it is. So we always have to remember this is not an exact science.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I suspect that the first medium whom I saw had a very difficult job, because I went to see her only a week or two after Patrick had died. I was desperate. I was desperate to know that he was okay. And so I suspect that I was just wrapped in grief and despair, and it would have been very difficult for anybody or anything to penetrate that.
Yes, indeed. So you had that experience. I was very interested in the disappearing objects, because that has happened to me on numerous occasions. That objects, I the last one that happened, I can almost say it disappeared before my very eyes. And it was a pendant that had fallen from the chain. I saw it fall, and I have yet to find it.
Goodness.
So it's like it dematerialized. I saw it, I heard it fall, I searched for it. Could it have rolled? Could it have gone under this? Could it have fallen into a drawer? I have emptied the chest of drawers, and I was not the only one to look. There were two pairs of eyes looking for this thing, and that was about 5 months ago. I have yet to find it. So tell us about your disappearing objects.
Well, the first one that disappeared was a fountain pen, my Mont Blanc pen. And a Mont Blanc pen is an expensive pen. I had once bought it for myself as a special treat, and I only used it very rarely because it was a special pen. And I was using it one afternoon. I was filling in a new address book, which somehow I felt urged to do. And anyway, then a neighbor came round with something to eat, which was very kind of her. And so I left the address book and the Mont Blanc pen on the kitchen table, and had supper, went to bed. The next morning, I went down, and there was the address book on the kitchen table, but no Mont Blanc pen. And I knew that I'd left it on the kitchen table. And I think what's quite clever of Patrick is it was something quite small, and so presumably a bit easier to move. But it was something precious, and I would notice its disappearance. Had I been writing with just any old ballpoint, then I wouldn't really have noticed that it was no longer on the kitchen table. And I don't have all that much jewelry, and so it would have been difficult for him to move my jewelry. It seems to me that the fountain pen was the most sensible thing in a way for him to move. Never found it. The most remarkable one was I was playing a game of bridge, and 4 people played bridge, and we were sitting around a card table. And with bridge, you have 2 packs of cards, and you play one hand with one pack and then the next hand with the other pack, and so on and so forth. And we played the first hand with the red cards. Fine, no problem. All the cards were there. The second hand we played with the blue cards, and then we went back to the red cards. And my friend was dealing, and she was a card short. So we sort of counted our cards, assuming she'd misdealt, but nobody had an extra card. So we thought, oh, it's odd. So it must have fallen off the card table. So we looked, no card. So we thought, this is ridiculous. We know that the pack was complete. We searched and searched and searched, all 4 of us. We could not find this card. So then somebody said, well, look, I bet it's Patrick. I bet it's a heart. So we looked to see what it was, and it was the 9 of hearts. So they said, oh, is that significant? And I said, well, no. I mean, had it been the Queen of Hearts or the Ace of Hearts, I'd have taken that. But the 9 of Hearts. Anyway, the card did not reappear. And a couple of days later, I was talking to a friend who does tarot. And she said, oh, well, the 9 of Cups in tarot, which is like the 9 of Hearts, that's the best card in the pack. It means the deepest, most wonderful, everlasting love. And so I thought, wow. She said, oh, that's a lovely card and very significant.
And this happens just before you're due to see a friend who does tarot.
Yes, yes.
And
yes, and you know what's really funny, Isabel? Patrick wouldn't have known anything about tarot when he was alive in the flesh.
No. But he's been doing a bit of learning since.
Obviously, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think we had better get to the WhatsApp messages.
Okay. Well, as I said before, they're sort of like text messages. And I found the first one on my phone when I had left the phone in the house and I'd been out and the house had been silent and locked up. And there were lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of words. Some were proper words, others weren't. And it was all in the message box to send to Maria, who is a medium whom I had been to see. And she did seem to be a bit of a portal for Patrick. I mean, when I went to see her, she was saying how she'd had all sorts of orbs of light and things from him. Anyway, I looked at all these words and couldn't make sense of them. And I was going to delete them all. And then I thought, oh, I'll send them to Maria. They're ready to be sent. So I sent them to Maria saying, hey, Maria, look what I found on my phone. No idea. What do you think? And so she replied and saying, no idea. The next day, she sent me a WhatsApp saying, hey, Louise, look what I have found on my phone. I didn't put it there, already sent to you. And it was a short paragraph. Some of the words weren't quite properly spelt, but 3 times it said in this paragraph, darling, it's me. And it also said Lilies and Valentine's Day 2019. And it was the repetition of darling, it's me. And he always called me darling. And I just thought, wow. And then, of course, because I'm a lawyer, I thought, well, I suppose Maria could have typed it and just be pretending that she found it on her phone. And Maria is lovely and very down to earth and sensible. She's a married woman with 2 children, and she does this sort of her mediumship, not for money, but because she has this gift and she likes to use it to benefit people. So, I mean, most of me didn't believe that she would have done anything like that. But of course, there was a teeny tiny bit of me which thought, could be. And anyway, the WhatsApps continued. She carried on getting more. And I was both thrilled and also not totally certain. And then one day in the August, after Patrick had died, I had the phone in my pocket and I was walking the dog. on a common in London. I got home and I pulled the phone out of my pocket, and the phone told me that I had created at 11 two WhatsApp groups, one consisting of Patrick and me, one consisting of Patrick, his daughter, and me. One was called Hamlin's, one was called Hamlin Family. And I stared at the screen, and I knew that I had not created these groups. I didn't even know at the time how to create a group. And I knew that at 11 I had been walking the dog on the common and the phone had been in my pocket. And I stared and stared. And I thought, oh my goodness me, it really is Patrick. And that then persuaded me 100, 200%.
Even allowing for the fact that sometimes we might dial accidentally when a phone is in our pocket. To create a group on WhatsApp has a very specific procedure, which involves picking out the names of the people that you want in the group from the phone book. So this is not something that could accidentally just happen. It's
there's no way it could have happened accidentally.
Out of everybody in your phone book, those were the people, his daughter and you. That's it. Nobody else, him, you, and his daughter. I think that's so extraordinary. It can only be called miraculous.
Yes, and it was actually his daughter's birthday that day. And I think that it was also a birthday present to her from him, saying, I'm alive in spirit.
Absolutely.
And she sort of contacted me straight away and said, hey, Louise, have you created a WhatsApp group with Daddy and me in it? And I said, no, it was not me. And my son, who's a lawyer, he spent a long time trying to work out how somebody could have hacked my phone to have done it. And he really worked hard trying to work this out. And in the end, he said, do you know what, Mum? Nobody could have done it unless they had your phone. And the phone was in your pocket. So it must have been Patrick.
Absolutely. It's interesting because just before we started, I was telling you that my mum has received a couple of messages from my dad, text messages, after he passed. His name came up on the phone, something she found quite shocking. And it's interesting that you were talking about in the messages how there were misspellings, because there was some of that as well, but within it also the title of a song that's very significant, that she's continued to play for him after he passed. That is an extraordinary thing, and they did ring the number that it came from to discover it was out of service. So these things can only be called miraculous and are designed to make us sit up and pay attention.
Yes, I think so. And I've obviously read a great deal and investigated. I haven't come across anybody else who has had WhatsApps, but I have come across people who've had emails and texts. And it seems that spirit is able to manipulate all this sort of electronic communication that we are developing and have developed. And that's great.
It makes sense because if we understand that they are energy, then the easiest means by which, I say easiest, very relatively speaking, the easiest means by which they could possibly communicate with us is by things that use energy. So the classic one would have been lights coming on or off. That's one that's very common. And has been well documented. So that's one. TVs coming on or off. We once had the experience of discussing my partner's father. We were talking about him in our kitchen, and the TV went on. And what was on the TV at that moment in time but Dad's Army, which, quite aside from having his, the reference to father in there, was probably, I think, one of his absolute favorite programs. So we looked at each other and we thought, okay.
I know.
So these things, and I think it's so important that we do share these experiences, because if we don't, when we are bereaved and our loved ones are making attempts to contact us, it's so easy to not notice or to dismiss.
Yes, and that is one of the reasons I wrote my book. I wanted to write about my bereavement and how I experienced it, because I looked for books when I was bereaved, and I found a lot of books written by so-called experts telling me about the stages of grief, but I didn't really find books by people who had actually experienced grief in its appalling horror. And so I wanted to write the book that I would have liked to have read, but also I wanted to tell the world that Patrick sent me these signs, because I wanted the world to know, so that other people can be consoled, to know that, yeah, we die, but our spirits survive and they still love us and we can still love them, and the loving relationship carries on.
I can think of no better message on which to end our conversation. So, Louise, thank you so much for your time today. The wonderful book, WhatsApps from Heaven, I will have the link to that on the description box. If people wanted to contact you or find out more about your work, how could they do that?
Well, I have a website, which is www.louisehamlin.com, and Hamlin is Hamlin. And I actually invite people to email me via the website if they would like to share their experiences. And I've had some wonderful emails. So yeah, if you have had experiences, please tell me about them.
Wonderful. I'll be sure to put a link to your website on the description box as well. Louise, thank you so much for your time today.
And Isabel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at spirit and science. How do they go together? Until then, goodbye.